afternoon. So, as you may have noticed, I'm not a software tester. So I guess I'm an imposter. I'm coming in here, swooping into your conference. So when they asked me to speak at Agile Testing Days, I'd heard awesome things because I was talking to Lisa and Gil, and they were like, this is my favorite conference. And I was like, oh, I really, really want to go. And they asked me to speak, and I'm like, I'm not a software tester. And they said, well, you could talk about testing, right? And I said, yes, actually, because I don't test software, but I do test product ideas. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. But before we get into that, I have a really important assignment for you. You ready? Does everybody have a cell phone? Can everybody take out their cell phone? I want you to take a selfie with the person next to you and post it on Twitter with hashtag Agile TD. Oh. Awesome. Good work. Okay, excellent. Also, before I get started, I want to give a big shout out to Stuart. Stuart over here is doing all the live drawings. Give him a shout out. Isn't that awesome? If you would like to see more of Stuart's drawings, you can follow him on Twitter at Stuart Live Art. Remember that, Stuart Live Art. Yes. You may have noticed this is a theme that we're doing this week, getting Stuart more followers. Okay, so enough of that. Today I want to talk to you about the minimum viable product. Minimum viable product. Who has heard of that word before? MVP, right? How many people like MVPs? A couple people. Okay, great. So I want to tell you about my experience with the minimum viable product and what I do with it. So I, like 99% of other product managers, learned about the MVP through The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. How many people have read that book? Lean Startup? A couple people? Okay, cool. So when I was reading this book too, it came at the best time because I had been working at a company as a product manager for a while. And we were, just transitioning to Agile at that point, and things were getting better. We had come from a waterfall environment, and we had a better pace. It was a little bit more sustainable. I had more clarity over what we were going to be shipping, but something was missing still. And right when I started reading this book, we had just released another product that nobody was using. So we spent 3 months building this beautiful dashboard for our users to use, and nobody used it. And I kept checking Google Analytics every day, going, come on, log in, people, use it. Isn't it great? I put everything in there that you wanted. And yet, nobody was coming. So when I started reading The Lean Startup, I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is amazing. This is what I need. Testing ideas, testing product ideas before we actually build them. What a novel idea, right? That sounds crazy. We weren't doing that before. And now I was excited. I was like, I want to use this. I can't wait to use this because I was going to build products that people actually liked and would use. So I started looking for my chance at work to actually try this out. And one day, I finally got it. One day, I was working at this e-commerce company as a product manager. And the CEO came up to me and he said, Melissa, I want to build a Twitter-like feed into our homepage so that the celebrities who sold stuff on our site could just post about whatever they want. They could talk about their dog, and Martha Stewart can post pictures of her cat, and Bobby Flay can be like, look, I'm chilling on the beach. And I was like, this sounds like a terrible idea. Yes, this is my chance. I can test things. This is so ripe with assumptions, right? Do people care about Martha Stewart's cat? I don't know, but we're going to find out. So I went back to the CEO, and I said, look, I went to the developers, I talked to them. We estimated about how long it would take to build this with all the features that you're requesting. And it's going to cost us about $75,000. But if you give me 2 weeks and just $2,000, I'll prove if this is a good idea. And he was like, yeah, sure, that makes sense, go for it. So we went out and we built an experiment. And within 1 week, we proved that it was a terrible idea. It was not making any difference from what we were doing during the day. So bad idea. But then we iterated on our experiment, did something else, and we actually doubled our conversion rate on certain products with that, with a whole new, faster idea. So at the end of those experiments, my whole company was hooked. They were like, yeah, keep experimenting, keep doing this. And I thought, duh, this is a no-brainer. Everybody must like this. Everybody loves this way of working. Or so I thought. And then like all good things, that came to an end, and I moved on to new challenges to go to a different company. And one day, I was sitting there. I was the head of UX at this company. I was sitting in a meeting a couple months in, and we had all the developers in there, the head of products, and we were breaking down this new epic. And the epic was going to take us quite a while to build. It was pretty complicated. And we were, writing out these laundry lists of user stories and features we wanted. And I said, hey, guys, wait a minute. Why don't we try something else? Why are we going to just plan this and build it like we always do? Why don't we try an experiment? What if we try an MVP? And the whole room went silent. And everybody looked at me like I offended their ancestors. And I was like, what did I do? Did I just start cursing? Like, what happened? Did I say something bad? Is there something on my face? And it was just very quiet and very awkward for a few minutes. And then the CMO looks at me, the head of product. He was also chief marketing officer. And he goes, we don't do that here. We don't build crappy products. And I was completely taken aback because I wasn't expecting that. But ever since that day, I've heard this a million times, at least, the same sentence. We don't do that here. We don't build crappy products. And I realize there's two different factions of people when it comes to MVPs. There are those that are scared of the MVP, like my offended cats in that company. They read about the MVP through Eric Ries's book, for example. And they thought maybe it's just, let's throw up a bunch of shit and see what happens. Websites break, things go down, and everybody gets very upset. So they are like, no more MVPs. I don't want to do this anymore. We build quality here. We don't do that type of stuff. But then, on the other side, there's people who love the term MVP, right? They're all about it. It's their favorite buzzword. And they just throw the term around without knowing what it means at all. So one of my favorites, too, is that I get it from clients. I do a lot more product management training now, but when I was doing UX work, I would have clients be like, oh, no, we just want an MVP. So all those things you're asking to do, like user research and these things, like just cut that out. We want the same amount of stuff, but in half the time and for half the money. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work that way, right? MVP it. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about this word. And I went to Twitter's and I asked people, what were your MVP horror stories? And this one comes up all the time. And MVP is whatever we build in the first release. It's just the first version of whatever we do. So this is not the way that I've defined an MVP. And I went back to actually look at what people were doing. Because the way I defined an MVP was the minimum amount of effort to learn. This is how my definition is always done, and this is how I teach it. Because I learned it through the Lean Startup. And the Lean Startup taught us that we just have to put in a little bit of effort to learn something and iterate on that and keep building. So it was never a first version to me, and this was really confusing me. Because when I got in and I started teaching this in workshops, I'll get a lot of people that go, no, it's not. They'll argue with me. They're like, no, it's the first version, trust me. I'm like, why are you in my workshop? Why'd you pay for this? So I get a lot of arguments from this. And I went to the internet and I researched because I said, you know what, let me find out what's going on here. Let me figure out where all this dissent is coming from. So I started Googling minimum viable products, and I found donuts, and I found cakes, and I found bicycles, and scooters, and I found all these different pictures, but I couldn't find the definition. So I said, let me go back and figure out where this word came from. And the first definition of the minimum viable product actually comes from 2001 by a guy named Frank Robinson. And he said the minimum viable product is that unique product that maximizes return on risk for both the vendor and the customer. That's interesting. That's a little bit different. We're talking about risk here, which I really like. I think that's very important. But that's not really where it became popular. So the two people who popularized these terms, Steve Blank and Eric Ries, had different definitions. So I went back to them as well. So the first time it shows up for Eric Ries is around 2009. And in a blog post, he writes, that product which has just those features and no more that allows you to ship a product that early adopters see and pay you money for and start to give you feedback on. So now we're talking about features, right? We're talking about a first version. Then I looked up Steve Blank. And in 2010, he said a minimum feature set, or a minimum viable product, so they're interchangeable now, is a customer development tactic to reduce engineering waste and to get products in the hands of early evangelists soonest. I think he made up that word. Then in 2013, though, Steve's singing a little bit of a different tune. He said an MVP is not always a smaller, cheaper version of your final product. So we went from minimum feature set to maybe not. And then, most recently, in 2016, Jim Berkman from Y Combinator says an MVP is not just a product with half of the features chopped out or a way to get the product out the door a little earlier. In fact, the MVP doesn't have to be a product at all. So if you go back and look online and try to figure out what a minimum viable product is, it looks really confusing because the people who popularize these terms don't seem to be agreeing with themselves. So I think this is what led to so many different arguments about what this is. And I think the point here to notice is that from the time of 2001 until now, the term has evolved. It's grown into something else. We've gotten better at creating software. We've realized that we don't have to test our hypotheses with only code. There's other ways we can do that, and other tools that have come out that allow us to do that as well. So we have to be a little bit more open-minded about how we learn if our product ideas are right. So what I'm proposing is this. Let's get rid of the word MVP. Let's just stop using that. I hate it. And let's start not arguing about this term and what it means, but talking about the goal. Because the goal of an MVP has never changed. And that goal is to learn what your customers want and need as early as possible. That goal has not changed from 2001. So instead of arguing about what it is, let's focus on how do we achieve this. And I think the point here, too, to look at is that an MVP is not an end state. It's not that thing that you release and you're done. It's not an event. It's a process, not a product. So this is a process to really learn about your customers and figure out what they want so you can build that product at the end of the day. So when we talk about product development, we need to talk about uncertainty in our products. That's what we really have to start to uncover. Because when we start off building a product, there's lots of questions we actually have to answer. Questions like, do our customers really have this problem that we think they have? How do we go and learn about that? What do our customers expect to gain at the end of the day by using this product, by solving that problem? What are they doing to solve their problems now? What are they using that's not working? What do they care about in a solution? What matters to them? Does it have to be mobile? Does it have to be desktop? What types of functionality do they need? And where will they use the solution? In what kind of context? These are just a few examples of questions that we should be able to answer before we commit ourselves to building a solution at the end of the day. So to do that, though, we learn the answers to these questions through experimentation. And experimentation, when you start talking to companies about this, they get a little scared. And I think that's really sad, because many top companies in the world use experimentation, like Pixar. Pixar has this ingrained into their culture. And Ed Catmull is one of the best people to look up about innovation and experimentation. He says that, my own belief is that you should be running experiments, many of which will not lead anywhere. If we knew how this was going to end up, we just go ahead and do it, right? He's talking about that uncertainty there. So we experiment to learn what we should be building and more about our customers. So in product development, we experiment around two things. The first of those things is problem-solution fit. So problem-solution fit answers the question, does this problem exist and can I solve it? So does this problem exist for our users and can we solve it as a company? Then we talk about the more common product-market fit. Is my product desirable enough to my market? So when we normally start with product development, a lot of people focus on product market fit, and they jump into building a minimum feature set and try to sell it as quickly as possible. But what they don't do is take a step back and make sure if the problem really exists, and to understand the context around that and why they're solving those problems for their users. So that's really where we have to start. Once we know that we can solve it and this problem is real, then we can go on to experimenting to actually sell it to our market. So how does this look like in real life? I want to tell you a story about a company I was helping earlier this year and how we were able to experiment through these things to find a good solution for them. So this company delivered boxes of food. It was like a meal kit delivery service. So you got a box once a week with a bunch of ingredients in it and recipes. And you would take out those ingredients. They were prepackaged, pre-portioned for like 2 people. You order what kind of food you want online, and it shows up. And then you cook it, and you enjoy it, and they're trying to get people to eat healthier, to learn how to cook, all those good things. So they're located in New York, and I went in to help them. So they hired me in to help them with product management, and they said, the biggest problem we're tackling right now is acquisition. So we've proved that people want our product. We've got thousands of people using this. We've grown in a really large scale so far, but we need to get more people so that it's sustainable. So what we really want to do is double our acquisition within the next year. So this was a clearly defined goal by management. They knew what they had to do. But how to solve it was really escaping them. So when I asked them what they had been trying, they said stuff like, oh, well, the price is too high, we should just lower it. We're more expensive than our competitors. Or they said, well, people just can't try it for free, so let's just let them try it for free. And then marketing had all these crazy ideas that they were convinced were going to solve the problems. They said, we should just put knives in there. Let's give everybody a free knife when they signed up. We're like, that sounds dangerous. Just open a box with a gigantic chef's knife in it. But no, this was really going to solve our problem. So all of these solutions, though, if you look at it, they're solutions, right? They're not problems. We weren't really investigating what the problem is for our users and why they weren't signing up. So we had to take a step back. We said, okay, but what's really going on here? Where's our problem? So my team got together, and we started digging in. Where are people dropping off? Why aren't they signing up? What's not working? And we realized that we had a problem with conversion rate. Our conversion rate was the biggest issue right there because people were getting to a certain step on our platform and then bailing. So we said, if we can actually increase conversion rate, rather than spending marketing money, we could acquire way more customers. We could hit that goal very easily. So we said, this is what we should focus on. And what that did is that streamlined our team into looking for different types of problems than let's put a knife in the box. So now we had to figure out, now that we knew what our goal was, we had to figure out what problems were standing in the way of us reaching those goals. So we needed to design ways to learn more. And this was a little tricky, because how many people have worked at like an e-commerce or consumer product? So when you're doing user research with that, right, you can't really talk to your users before they sign up, because you're not capturing their email addresses. So we were doing usability studies where we'd bring people in and have them, play with things. And we weren't learning much. And it's because they're not in the right context of when they would be at home trying to buy something. So we had to figure out, how can we learn from people who are actually experiencing these problems in real time? And what we did is we went online. Actually, my developer found this. He went online, and he found this tool that would allow us to talk to them. And it was called Qualaroo. And what Qualaroo did is a little bit of JavaScript that we put on the page where people were dropping off the most. And as they would navigate towards the back button, it would come up, and we wrote, what's stopping you from signing up today? And he said, I found this thing. I could put it up there in an hour. You want me to try it? And I was like, yeah, but I don't know if people are going to answer like an empty box like that. Maybe we should do multiple choice. He goes, I can change it in 5 minutes. Let's just try it. I said, okay, let's do it. So within 2 days, we had 300 responses. Within 2 weeks, we had 5,000 responses. Like, tons of people were answering this. And they were all saying things that were not, I need a free knife, or I can't try it for free, right? Their top reasons they were signing up, by far and away, the top one, a third of people could not find the menu. They could not find the food that they would be delivered next week. They were like, what food do I get? Are you going to send me pizza? Are you going to send me sandwiches? I don't know. So they could not find where the food was or what we were actually offering. A lot of people said, too, like, what's in the box? Like, what do I get? Is it pre-cooked? I don't understand. Do I have to cook it? Is it recipes? Do I get ingredients? Do I need other things? So there was a lot of confusion around who we were as a company, right? Some basic information was missing. And only the third highest one was the price was too high. And that, too, was more like, why? Why are you higher than the other ones? And it was because we had organic food, we had, much better quality meat, and we were not explaining that to people. So the site, too, was this beautiful, long scroll, newly branded website, newly branded, scary word there, where it was all about looking great, but it had no information on it. So the first experiment that we tried, we said, let's try to solve this. This was a page where they were dropping off the address form before they put in their credit cards. This is where they were all leaving. We said, well, let's just answer their questions right here. And we tried that, and it worked a little bit. But we said, you know what? We're not really solving the problem. They get here because they were looking for more information, but they should find that information earlier. So we said, this experiment didn't work. Let's try another one. The main problem was that this was our homepage. And if you look up there, that Explore button is a hamburger menu. And a hamburger menu hides everything on a desktop. So all the information they were looking for was buried under there, especially the menus, and nobody could find it. 2% of people clicked on that. So we were hiding everything from them. So we said, okay, next experiment. Let's just make a normal menu page up here. We have the page that says menus on it, but we have no other pages on the site. It's just one long scroll, remember? So we said, let's just put out menus, and I told the team, just grab what other pages you can find and put them up there, and let's see if that helps. And by releasing this, we were able to get almost all the way up to our goal, just by showing people where the menus were. And we said, okay, this is it. We have to make it easier for people to actually see something. So this was not sustainable. We did it fast. We put it up there just to see if it would work. And then we went back to the drawing board and we started releasing things piece by piece and made a whole more comprehensive website. And by doing that, we were able to reach the goal. So this, started out by everybody going, oh, let's just throw marketing money at it, right? We have an acquisition problem. So let's go spend a couple $1 million with TV commercials and, sending out knives and giving people free trials. And that wasn't the problem. The problem is they couldn't find things. The problem was with our layout and our website and how we didn't explain things. So we systematically were able to prove this in a matter of 2 months, rather than trying all these things and failing. So we took a step back and actually saw that. But with all experimentation, your first experiment will never work, right? So Amazon has a great statistic that says only 1 in 20 experiments actually work. And it was frustrating for our team when we were doing this, because we tried a bunch of A/B tests. People were like, oh, it's because we have a steak on the homepage, and obviously some people are vegetarians, so we shouldn't have a steak on the homepage. Let's A/B test that. Yeah, but it didn't matter, right? Like, the problem was not the steak. So we tried so many different experiments that didn't work until we landed on this, and then we were able to learn and keep going. So the point of this is your first experiment might not work, but you need to be able to learn from each of them so you know what steps to take next. There's no failed experiment if you can keep learning, which also leads me to another contentious point. So while we were building this and experimenting, our CTO came in one day, and he said, okay, this is fantastic. I understand you're experimenting, but what is your product strategy? And I said, what do you mean? Like, here's our goal. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going towards. And he said, no. I want you to go build me a document that's 10 pages long with all these requirements in it on what we can build for a content management system. And I said, but we don't know what should be on that page yet because nobody's buying anything. And he was like, no. You tell me what should be on that page. I was like, I can't. I literally can't tell you what should be on that page. And we got into this argument. And this is what I see all the time. People see product strategy as a plan of what to build. Right? They say, your product strategy is you're going to release feature A, feature B, feature C this year. It's going to wrap into this back end, and all this will work together. But product strategy should not be a plan, because there's so much uncertainty about what you're going to build at the beginning. As you become more clear through experimentation, you can start to say what features are needed. But your strategy should never be a plan, because plans fail. So, product strategy should actually emerge from experimentation. We should be trying to figure out where we should be heading towards our vision of our company by experimenting with things, by trying to figure out what it is that our customers want. And the best way I found to describe this is something called unified field theory by Bill Constantino and Mike Rother. So I do a lot of work with Toyota Kata as well, and I find it works really well for product management. And these guys look at that for manufacturing, and they've been translating it into other terms we can understand and harness. So for me, this is how I think of product strategy. We have our current state, where we are right now as a company. We have our vision of where we want to go in the future. That's like 5, 10 years out. And then we have our first challenge, which is the big goal we have to reach to get to our vision. So it looks a little something like this. In our current state, we're aware of all these problems to solve, improvements we can make, or feature ideas we can build. But we have a threshold of knowledge. There's only so many problems we're aware of. There's only so much information we know at a certain time. So we have to navigate this uncertainty. And the way that we do is by setting something called a target condition. Our target condition is that first small step that's reachable. It's actually something you can get to. You can try to figure out how to get there before we get to a big challenge. And then what we do is we navigate through this unclear territory with experimentation. So that, once we reach a target condition, becomes our new current state. Okay, that probably makes general sense, but let's look at it in context. So the product strategy for a food delivery startup would look something like this. In 5 years, our food delivery startup will be a top dinner option for the target market. So what they wanted to do was not replace dinner. They didn't want to say, okay, you're not going to go to the supermarket and cook. You will do that Monday and Friday. And on Tuesday, Thursday, you have our company's food. And then you go out to dinner on Saturday, right? We're an option. We're a habitual option in somebody's dinner schedule. And their first challenge in order to reach the vision was to double acquisition. That was the most pressing challenge for the company at that time, to get there. And our target condition for our team, that's what we were responsible for, that was our measure of success, was to increase the conversion rate across all the platforms by a certain percentage. And we knew where we were at that time. So this is a structure for management as well. At the bottom is our team's goals, and at the middle is our section or our division's goals, and that rolls up to the vision of our company. And what management would do is give this to us so that we would understand where we're going and how we all tie in. So this is how we communicate product strategy. And we experimenting using things like the product kata, which you can read more about on my blog, but it's the same systematic thing that we just talked about. What are the problems that we're trying to solve here? How can we experiment to solve them? What did we learn? Where are we now? And what is the next step that we have to take to get there? How far are we from our target condition? So we continuously experiment in order to reach these target conditions, these challenges, and eventually our vision at the end of the day. So when we look at this too, though, it's kind of hard to imagine in the current state of our world, because a lot of times what I see product teams dealing with is that management dictates down what they should be building. They go, you guys go build these 7 features this year. And that's not how it should work. What this product strategy allows us to do is really what the leaders should be doing. They should be setting visions, goals, and guardrails. Stay within these lines, but go, experiment, right? Not dictating to people what the solutions are that you should be building. That's what great leaders do. They help keep the train on the track, but they give people enough space and enough safety to go out there and actually experiment. So when I say this to when I talk about experimentation, right, especially with our food delivery startup, I always get the question, okay, MVPs are nice for, small little improvements, but when do we focus on big ideas? I get an argument that you can't be innovative or disruptive if you're always just continuously experimenting on small things. And I agree with that, because experimentation, though, it's not an excuse for thinking small. You just have to have bigger goals to experiment around. And there's a lot of companies that do this today. So one of my favorite examples is HighFly. Anybody taken HighFly before? Yeah, so they're a European company. This is one of my favorite stories. So I used to take Norwegian Air a lot last year when I was trying to save money coming to Europe, and I hate that airline. I will say it right now, it's the worst, because they would delay my plane 3 hours every time, and then twice, the plane didn't show up, and I got an email saying I'm taking HighFly instead. So HighFly is this old Emirates airline that this Portuguese company bought. And what they do is they're an airline for hire. So they'll swoop in to save the day for crappy companies like Norwegian Air, who cannot fulfill their airline duties. But what their business model is great for is that, let's say, Delta wants to try to do a new route between Brazil and London. They don't know if it's going to work. So normally, they would have to go out and invest $200 to $450 million on a new plane. That's how much those things cost. So instead, they contract with HighFly and say, we're going to sell tickets for this route through our site, and then we will pay you guys to fly the route. And you'll learn all of our standard service stuff. We'll put all the food on the planes and all that stuff. And then at the end of those 3 months, we'll see if it was profitable. And if it is, we'll invest in a new plane. And if it's not, we say thank you very much. And for a fraction of that cost, we just proved if it was worth it or not. So this is how big airlines actually test demand for routes. And they're able to fulfill on it as well and deliver that value, saving $400 million sometimes. Another one I really like is Airbnb. So when Airbnb was getting started, the founders were looking at their data, and they saw that there's not a lot of stuff going on in New York. There's lots of postings, but people are not booking apartments in New York City. I'm from New York City too, and I'm curious why that is. So I was reading this article about them and learning. And what the founders did is they said, okay, let's fly there and sit with the hosts and figure out what's going on. So they flew in, they sat down, and they looked around the apartments and they said, these are nice. Why is nobody booking this? This is crazy. And then they went online and they saw that the photos that people were posting were terrible. right? They were these like really sketchy photos out of those like 2-megapixel cell phone cameras. And it looked really scary. And it's like, no, I'm going to end up in like a hostel and die. So nobody was booking it because the photos were terrible and they were not doing the apartments justice. So they had the hypothesis that if we put better photos on there, people would book more. So they had a couple routes they could do, either train all their hosts to go take better photos, but instead what they did is they ran across the street to a camera shop, bought a $400 camera, and came back and then took photos that looked awesome and put them online. And they A/B tested it. And they found that those apartments went skyrocketing, right? The sales were crazy on it. And they said, oh, this is it. People just can't see the apartments. So then they put a bunch of hosts in San Francisco and New York in touch with other photographers, and they paid for them to get photos done. So when they implemented this, their sales went crazy. And this is a thing that really started making Airbnb successful. And it was just with a small experiment of let's just try this, let's figure out what the problem is, try this, and then implement a full system for it that really, really made the difference. Another one, Amazon Echo. Anybody have the Echo? Yeah? A couple people. So Amazon Echo its name is Alexa. I don't know why, but you can talk to it, and it will tell you stuff like the weather and look up stuff, give you information. So they had the hypothesis that it had to be more lifelike than Siri, right? They didn't want it to be robotic. So they said, okay, how do we figure out how this can actually be more lifelike? What is the threshold for people enjoying speaking to this thing? So that they put an Alexa, like the body, in a room, and they brought in a bunch of test subjects to come talk to it. So they had people come in, they give them a list of questions they could ask, and they had a microphone, a little speaker in it, that was attached to a microphone in the other room. And they had a woman sit there and vary her speech pattern into Alexa, and have a developer would sit there and Google everything and tell her what it was. And they would test the answers to everything. And they surveyed people coming out and said, how enjoyable was it? What'd you think? They would talk to them and figure it out. And that's how they developed the voice for Alexa. So they did lots of testing to figure out what are the solution requirements for this. Okay, this one is by far my favorite example, though. So last year, I was coaching startups in London, and there was a team called Give Vision. And Give Vision is making glasses for the blind. It's a really awesome goal. So what these glasses do is they look like normal glasses, and they have a little speaker that connects to your ear. And it will read things. It will recognize objects and currency. And for example, if a bus is coming, it will say the number 32 going to wherever, and it will talk into your ear. And it was really amazing. They've done crazy research with their subjects as well, following them around, trying to figure out what the pain points are. And when they were setting out to actually build the glasses, they found out that it was going to take maybe 2 to 3 years to actually implement them fully. And they said, well, we can't wait that long. How do we actually experiment on this faster? So what they did is they took an Android phone, and they programmed it with the software using the camera on the phone, and then they 3D printed glasses holders for the phone, and they gave them to your subjects to wear around. So that's me looking like an idiot with it. And then they gave them to their actual people who were in their beta group, and they wore it around, and it acted just like the glasses. It read the bus stops, it read the currency, it recognized colors, and they were able to get direct feedback on what their software was doing, how it was interacting with them. And they were able to program that in 1 month instead of 2 years. So they're taking those cycle loops, finding out new interesting ways to actually experiment and learn around it, and getting more feedback. Also, they were able to get an investment before they launched as well. So what they did is they refined it a little bit more, got a new set of headsets up there, and during TechCrunch Disrupt, they had a bunch of cans and magazines and photos you could look at, and you could wear these around, and they acted just like the regular glasses would, but they were only programmed to read the stuff in that little room, right? So you can simulate it and see what it's like, so they can get investment and try it out with people, but they didn't have to build the whole thing. So here they are experimenting, learning, really trying to figure out, what it is that our customers want at the end of the day, without investing in the whole thing first. So the point is, solving big problems for users creates big value for businesses. And that's something that we forget a lot. When we talk about value in companies, we talk about features. We say, oh, we're going to release value to the customer. And for some reason, that became a synonym now. A synonym. So value and features are not synonyms, right? If your feature is not solving a problem for your customer, they don't care, right? They're not going to use it. So what we really have to remember is that we are here to solve a problem, and that's what we really need to focus on. And when this way of experimentation can be a little uncomfortable for people too. I've worked with a lot of teams where developers are going, and designers as well, I just want to know what to build. Just tell me what to build. And I'm like, no, we're going to experiment. We're going to learn. And I think it's really important that we remember that this is messy. And Ed Catmull, another good quote from him, he says, "A fundamental tension is that people want clear leadership, but what we're doing is inherently messy. We know intellectually that if we want to do something new, there will be some unpredictable problems. But if it gets too messy, it actually does fall apart. And adhering to pure original plan falls apart too, because it doesn't represent reality. So you are always in this balance between clear leadership and chaos. In fact, that's where you're supposed to be." So that's what we have to remember as product leaders as well. It's okay to be a little bit messy. We're going to experiment. It's not going to work all the time, but we're going to learn from that and move on with it. So we have to really fall between these lines and find a good pattern for it. And I think the most important task for leaders as well is to provide teams with a safe space to actually experiment. When I get into companies to actually do this, one of the most biggest arguments I hear is that people go, "Oh, we can't experiment. It will affect our brand." And I always hear that from designers as well. I got into a very big argument with a creative director over this that lasted for 8 months. And they go, no, but it's our brand. You can't sacrifice our brand. And they want to make things pixel perfect. They want to put things out that are the best things in the world so everybody sees it. But I think it's really important to think about what brand is. And this is my favorite quote from my friend Bill Beard. He says, "Your brand is how people feel about your product or service. It's how people feel. It's not pixel perfection at the end of the day." And that's how we have to really think about it. That's what we have to embrace when we're experimenting. If you look at some of the best, companies out there, very few are actually built on pixel perfection. That's Apple's brand promise, but that's not anybody else's really, right? So we're not Apple. We don't have to be like that. We have to be a little bit messy. If we're delivering value to our customers by solving their problems, they do not care if it's perfect. So the cost of delay is really too high for companies to focus on this. So cost of delay says that the longer that we wait to put things out, the more money we lose, because we could be capturing that value for users. So we have to remember that spending 10 more weeks making something pixel perfect may lose us a bunch of money. And most companies that don't have a lot of money can't afford to do this, right? Your competitor will swoop in and get it out faster, and still deliver value. So this affects our brand. Waiting too long to solve people's problems affect your brand. If they're unhappy, they will leave. So we need to get things out fast, and then we have to remember to go back and iterate. So many times we'll release the first version of something and then be like, "That's it, okay, bye, coffee, on to the next one," right? On to the next one. We always say that. It's like, it's out there, it's good enough, let's move on. And we never iterate. But you are not agile if you are not iterating. That's the whole premise. So when we do a sprint and we release, we need to go back and learn and make it better so that we can get feedback faster. So one thing to remember, too, is that Agile doesn't really have a brain. So when you look at Scrum tells you how to get the work done, but it doesn't tell you what work you should be working on. It doesn't do the experimentation there and try to figure out what people want. So we need to put a brain on this process, and we do that by experimenting, by learning about our customers, to really understand what it is they want and need before we commit to building that. So I dream of one day walking into a company and mentioning the word MVP, and they don't say we don't do that here. They go, "Yeah, that's great." But I know that's pretty far off. So what I recommend for now is to not use the word MVP. Let's focus on experimentation. Let's focus on learning what our users want early and often and delivering value to them by solving their problems. Thank you very much.